Welcome to KCC Math 65, Section 6.6, Solving Quadratic Equations by Factoring. So you've spent the first 5 sections of this chapter learning about factoring, and now we're just going to take one more tiny little step and show you how to solve those equations using all the different types of factoring you've just learned. Okay, the definition of a quadratic, right? Quadratic function is it's got a degree 2, so it's got 3 terms. It's a trinomial. Okay, A, B, and C are real numbers. This is our standard form. Notice that the x squared comes first, then the x, and then the constant. Okay, so where A and B and C are all real numbers, and A does not equal 0. B or C could be 0. So it could be a quadratic, and it is like 4x squared plus 5. That would still be a quadratic because it's still a degree 2 equation. All right. Note also that the variable is to the second degree. All right, now we have something called the zero product rule, and this is something we all know at this point, but we may not realize we know it. We use it without realizing it. Okay, we know that if A times B is equal to 0, then either A or B has to be 0. In other words, if I have 5 times 0, what's that equal to? 0. If I have 0 times 10, that's 0. Can I have some number times another number, neither of them being 0, that equals 0? Of course I can't. One of them is going to have to be 0 in order for the product to be 0. That's what your product rule is telling you. So when you have a quadratic equation and you have factored it down to a set of factors that are non-zero factors, and it's equal to 0, then we know both of these must, one or the other, must be 0. Could be both if they're the same number. One or the other, at least, must be a 0 for this to be true. So you have 2 solutions. All right, x squared plus 7x plus 12 equals 0. So we factor it. We're going to factor it with x. I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit more. All right. Factors of 12 that subtract to 7. Sorry, that add to 7. 3 and 4 are going to be my solutions. So 3 and 4. And since it's a plus and the other is a plus, they're all pluses. Okay, now if this is equal to 0, we know that x plus 3 has to equal 0, or x plus 4 has to equal 0. Well, if we solve this, if we solve this equation, we get that x equals minus 3. And if we solve the second equation, sorry, I didn't mean to put that equal there. If we solve the second equation, we know that x has to equal negative 3 or negative 4. So that would be my solution. Okay, it's just using the factoring we've been doing all along and taking one more teeny tiny step. All right, so let's look at this one. Well, we have to move things around because we need the x squared on the same side as all the other terms. Since the x squared is positive, I'm going to make it look like this. I add the 12x to the other side, and I add 20. There we go. That shifts everything around. Now it's in the proper standard form, so I can factor it. Now, I have factors of 20 that add to 12, 2, and 10. It's a plus, and they're both pluses, so again, they're both pluses. All right, now we set each of these equal to 0. If I subtract 2 from both sides, I get x equals -2. If I subtract 10 from both sides, I get x equals -10. Okay, so that is my solution. Now, if I plug those in to check, let's say I have -2. So -12 times -2 minus 20, would that equal -2 squared? All right, -12 times -2 is 24. Minus 20, is that equal to -2 squared is 4? Yes, it is. So that one works. You can plug in the -10 and be sure. -12 times -10 gives me 120. Minus 20, does that equal -10 squared? Well, -10 squared is 100. 120 minus 20 is 100. There we go. So check. That one works too. That's how we check our answers. On any test, quiz, or anything like that, you always, always, always want to check your answers. Okay. Again, I need to move things around. X squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. So I subtracted the 6 from both sides. So I have x, that equals 0. Okay, so factors of 6 that subtract to 1. That subtract 3 and 2. All right. The larger term is negative, my larger term being the 3. So x minus 3 equals 0, or x plus 2 equals 0. If I add 3 to both sides, x equals 3. If I subtract 2 from both sides, x is -2. So x is equal to 3 or -2. All right, so I can plug this in. I forgot to box that one. I can plug these in to check. 3 squared is 9. Minus 3 is equal to 6. That works. -2. -2 squared is 4. Minus a -2. Does that equal 6? Check. Sure does. Okay, so that gives us our answer. All right, this is already factored for us. This single x all by itself is going to generate an x equals 0, or x plus 2 equals 0. Subtract 2 from both sides, and I get x equals -2. So my answer is 0 or -2. I can plug them in. If I plug in a 0, I get 0 times x plus 2. It's still going to be 0, whatever it is. All right. If I plug in -2, x, it's -2 times -2 plus 2 is 0, so -2 times 0. 0. Check. Yes, it was a mental check. All right, moving on. We just have some more we're going to work through just as examples. All right, 5x squared. We're going to have 5x squared minus 10x equals 0. Now I can factor out a monomial. Both terms have a 5x in them. That's going to leave behind x minus 2. So, if I say that 5x equals 0, that means x has to equal 0. Because the 5 is never going to equal 0. So the x has to be the one to equal 0. I also have x minus 2 equals 0. If I add 2 to both sides, x is equal to 2. So my x is 0 or 2. Not too bad. All right. I can factor out a 2. I'm left with x squared minus 25. Whoops. right over 12, 25. Well, hopefully you see that that's a difference of squares. That's a difference of squares. So I've got minus 5 and x plus 5. And that's going to equal 0. The 2 is never going to equal 0, so it's not part of our solution. X minus 5 equals 0, or x plus 5 equals 0. So x equals plus and minus 5. This gives me the positive, and this gives me a negative. All right. All right, let's look at this. Now, this is just not nice. I'm going to have to FOIL this, combine the 4 in, have it all equal 0, and then refactor it. What a pain. But there you have it. So, I FOIL. I have x squared minus 10x plus 25. Okay, over here, I'm going to show that, right? Because remember, when I square something, it means this. So I FOIL that. So I get x squared minus 5x minus 5x plus 25. These two add up to a negative 10x, and that's how I get this number. All right, so now I add in that 4. So I have 0. I subtract 4 from both sides. I subtract 4, I now have 21. Now I have to factor this again. X. All right, factors of 21 that add to 10. Well, 21, 3 and 7. All right. The largest one, nope, this is an add, so they're both the same sign, and that sign is a negative. So now I have that x minus 3 equals 0, and x minus 7 would equal 0. I add 3 to both sides, x equals 3, or x equals 7. Sorry, that's an x. So that means my answer is x equals 3 or 7. Now, if you're going to check this, you plug it in to the beginning equation. So 3 minus 5 squared. Well, sure enough, that's 2, isn't it? 3 minus 5 is a negative 2, and it's squared. That's going to give me 4. I plug in the second term. 7 minus 5 is a positive 2. When I square it, I get 4. So these are both accurate. Okay. Now I'm going to have to multiply, distribute all these, get it all together. All right, so I've got m squared plus 9m equals 8m plus 20. Now I have to get them all on one side. The m squared is already positive, so I'm shifting everything to that side. M squared. If I subtract 8m, I'm left with just m, and then I subtract the 20. Factors of 20 that subtract to 1. You got it, 5 and 4. It's a subtraction, so the largest is a plus there. So m plus 5 equals 0. Subtract 5 from both sides. Or m minus 4 is equal to 0. We add 4 to both sides. So m is 4 or negative 5. Okay, it looks like we have 2 more. Get everything on one side. This x squared is positive, so I'm moving everything to this side. 4x squared. I subtract 12x from both sides, and I add 9. Well, nothing in common. I've got a 4, which is 2 times 2, and a 9, which is 3 times 3. Nothing in common. So, I'm going to first try 2x, and that's equal to 0. And then I have to factor 9. We'll try 3 and 3. Sure enough, that's going to give me 6's, right? 6 and 6. 6 plus 6 is 12. So, it's a plus 9, meaning they're both signs are the same, and it's a minus 12, meaning they're both negatives. Boom, boom. So look, they're the exact same term. So I really only have to work with one. So I add 3 to both sides, and I divide by 2. And that, there is only one solution to, because it's a double solution, but it's only one. All right, one last one to do, and then we're done with this lesson. I'm going to write this in standard form. So I flipped those 2, and then I'm adding the 2 to the other side to get this in standard form. Leading coefficient, it's prime, so I really only have one choice. And my final constant 2 is prime also. So I need some combination that's going to equal 7. Well, I have 2 and 3, and that's going to give me 6. So I have to put the 2 in, which means that 6 plus 1. There we go. They're all pluses, so these are all pluses. All right, equals 0. 3y plus 1 equals 0. Y plus 2 equals 0. 3y, subtract 1 from both sides. Now I have to divide by 3. Here I just subtract 2. So my final answer is -2 or -1/3. All right. Hopefully that's not too difficult. If you have questions, please do call me. I'm happy to work with you. I'm totally getting into the whole Zoom thing, so I can Zoom questions, and we can talk about how to do these. So if you have questions, please let me know, and we can work through this. Thank you very much.